We're here today with Paula Morell, the creator and founder of Tales from the South. Tales from the South has been around now for 8 years. Tell me how it originally came about.
Well, it's an interesting story. I mean, the short version is that I'm an English professor as well. That's really what my background is. And I was teaching online for a university in Florida, living in Arkansas. And a colleague of mine was teaching for the same university. He lived in San Francisco. And he sent a call for stories out for a show that he was starting out in San Francisco at a public radio station. So I sent the call to my writer friends in Arkansas, and I said, hey, they're looking for some stories, send them to me, and I'll send them on to him. Well, his show fell through. And so suddenly I had 10 really good stories on my hands. And so I just literally called KUAR and said, I've got 10 really good stories, and the storytellers are willing to come in and read them on the air. What do y'all think? And Ron Breeding, who was the program director at the time, he said, well, come down and pitch the show to us. I literally had to hang up the phone and look up how to pitch a radio show. I had no intentions of starting a radio. I have no background in radio, nothing like that. So I did. I figured out how to do that. I went down and talked to them, and right off the bat, they loved the idea. They said, why don't we turn this into a weekly show? And I said, well, how much does it pay? And they said, this is public radio. It's a volunteer position. I said, well, I don't have time to do anything like that. However, I love the idea of being able to give people a platform to tell their stories, and so how about we do it once a month? So that's how we started out. We started out once a month, and at the time we used to just go up to ULR, up to KUAR public radio, and it used to be on the campus at the time, 8 years ago, and we used to just go up there in the sound booth, and our writers would do their stories in the sound booth, and no audience or anything. And then after about a year, I realized that I have a restaurant, and I could actually have a live audience here at the restaurant. So then we started doing that, and then it's just built since then. And so 2 years ago, William F. Levin Public Library came to me and they said, what do you think about turning this into a weekly program? And I said, well, I'd have to have some kind of funding. I mean, it's just a little volunteer project that I do on the side. And they said, well, we'll provide some funding, we'll sponsor it, see what happens, we'll do a 16-week pilot, and see how it goes. And so that's when we added the dinner, that's when we added the music, all that stuff, because I thought, well, we need to turn it into more of an event. And so we added the music and the dinner, and just right off the bat we started selling out shows. Griff Stockley was our first person on, and we've sold out almost every show since. And so it's just taken off. So it's been exciting to see it do that, you know. So
you're now on nearly 50 public radio stations around the country, and also heard worldwide on WRN and Stitcher. Did you ever think Tales from the South would get this big?
Never. And the only foresight, if I had any foresight, it was to name the show Tales from the South instead of Tales from Arkansas, because I thought, it did dawn on me, what if this actually turned into like a real radio show? What if this became like, bigger than just airing here locally? And so I thought, well, I'm going to name it Tales from the South, because the way that Southern people tell stories, to me, is pretty consistent. And so I thought, well, just turn it into Tales from the South, and then we'll kind of go from there. So that's the only foresight that I have. It's funny because many people have said to me, oh, you're so smart, you've really, you figured out how to market your restaurant, and you figured out how to, I'm like, you know what, I appreciate the compliment, but it's all just kind of fallen into place. It's not anything I really thought out that much, which has made a lot of fun for me to kind of see how it's just grown on its own. And I certainly have worked hard at what I've done, but I never sat down with a plan, okay, in 8 years this is where I want to be.
Why do you think Tales from the South has been so successful?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. The main reason is because as a society, as a culture, we've lost that storytelling that's so vital to people, to humans in general. Because we're on our devices and we have these, 16-word texts and tweets, and we're just so. And I mean, here at the restaurant, I will see a table full of people, and all of them are on their mobile device. They're not even looking at each other. And I think storytelling connects us in a way that's vital. I mean, it's been around since the beginning of time, and so that's how we, that's how we learn from our past. That's how we, are able to move into our future and teach each other things about ourselves, but also when people tell their personal stories, we're connecting with them on not only a one-to-one person, telling us this story, but also all the history behind that and the universality. Their story may not be something that I experienced directly, but there's usually something in there that I recognize, and that's what pulls us together. And I think that these projects like this are giving people an opportunity to once again connect we need that. we need that, you know. And the funnest part for me after the show is when people are still sitting around telling stories, and my servers are all like, get them out of here, but I'm like, this is what it's all about. You know, now they're telling their own stories, and now they're opening up and they're communicating. They don't have their devices out. They're not texting each other or sitting across the table. They're actually telling, and you know, that reminds me of the time when I was in third grade, or I hadn't thought of that since 1943, or whatever it is. And it's connecting people again, which is incredibly vital, incredibly vital.
What makes a story a Tales from the South story?
Well, we don't have, you know, real rigid guidelines. The only requirements are that the writer must be from the South, so either from here originally or living here now. You can be a transplant. We say 10 years. You have to be here 10 years before we consider you one of us. So it's the writer, not the story. So the story can be set anywhere in the world. We've had stories set in Vietnam. We've had stories set in Mexico, and you know, probably all 50 states. I mean, our stories are set all over the world. Most of them are set in the South, but they don't have to be. They can be set anywhere. But beyond that, you know, when we get the story in, most stories that come to us are not ready to go. It takes a lot of editing. There's a lot of editing on my end. I edit all the stories myself. And I really help the writer understand how to start a story, how to engage a listener, how a story that's heard on the radio is different than read in a book. You know, how to not only engage the listener right off the bat, but also keep their attention. And you know, I can't tell you how many people say to me, I sat in my driveway and I couldn't go in. You know, my ice cream's melting in the back seat, but I couldn't go in because I wanted to hear the end of that story. And I'm like, yes, that's what it's all about. So we do a lot of work on the editing end of it, but when they come to us, we don't reject stories. This project to me has never been about taking what I think is the best story or what I think is going to be the best for the show. That's not what it's about. I want to give everyone an opportunity to tell their story, because everyone has a story, multiple stories. You know, our lives are made up of stories, and so we don't reject stories. So a story may come to us that needs a lot of work. And that will be on the show just as easily as a story that comes to us from a professional writer and it's pretty much ready to go as is. So it's not a rejection situation.
In your submission guidelines, you say that you're looking for a literary memoir, not a personal essay. Can you explain the difference?
Well, and that it can be something that is very confusing for people who haven't studied it. And even for some writers who have studied it and still aren't able to step out enough to see their own work, that can be difficult. But the difference is that, and personal essays sometimes very much straddle the line of memoir. But the goal of a story is to build to a climax, and so there's a very set structure to it. You know, you have to start in the action and the tension of the story. You have to build up to a central point in the story. And there may be little or no resolution. It doesn't have to have resolution, but there have to be these very distinct characteristics of a story. An essay doesn't have to have those things. An essay may have narrative in it, where that uses a narrative as examples, but it doesn't have to have that very distinct structure. So, you know, essays really are about explaining things in a lot of ways. Stories really don't explain things. They present something, and then the reader or the listener is then left to, you know, kind of come to the climax with the writer.
A lot of the stories seem to have a moral or a lesson. Is that something that you look for?
I don't, and if it's too overt, I actually get the writer to take it out. But good storytelling does have that. You know, good literature does have that, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It has that unifying theme. It has that thing that pulls it all together and makes us go, aha. You know, what one of my writing instructors once called dropping breadcrumbs along the way, so that by the time you get to the end of the piece, there's no other way it could have happened. Like, you get it. You're like, oh, I get it, you know. So...
How do you keep a Southern flavor to the show?
That's an interesting question, and something that a lot of Northerners ask me. What makes a Southern story, you know? And that's a loaded question. I don't know. As a Southerner myself, it's very difficult for me to step back and say, this is what makes us who we are. That's, and in a lot of ways, it's uncomfortable for me to try to do that. But I can tell you what it's not. You know, what Tales is not is it's not Honey Boo Boo. It's not Duck Dynasty. Those have their own thing, and they're great for what they do. That's not what we do. We're not trying to capitalize on what is Southern. We're not trying to, make it hokey. We're not trying to, sound. Someone asked me just at Eureka Springs, she said, well, do you do a fake Southern accent when you do the show? And I said, absolutely not. That's not what Tales is. If you come or you turn on the radio to listen to something that's hokey, that's just not what we do. There's plenty of good kind of, more mature, audiences that are much more interested in the good storytelling that comes out of the South. There's a great legacy of storytelling in the South. And so, what makes it Southern? I can tell you that, there's certain themes that tend to run through the stories, whether it's, kind of a tragedy and comedy mixed together, or kind of a little self-deprecation in there. Maybe there's some religion mixed in. Food is usually present in a lot of these stories. Is that particularly Southern? I don't know, But I do know that when people send me stories, I can tell when they're trying to sound Southern. And it's awkward because I'm like, you're trying to make this sound like a Southern story. If you just write me the story, it's going to be Southern enough, You don't have to try to make it sound Southern, I guess I should probably come up with a better answer because people ask me that all the time, but I honestly don't know how to label that, All I can say is that I don't know necessarily what it is, but I know what it isn't when it comes to us. And it just needs to be genuine.
Is the music a key to keeping the Southern flavor?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And that was, once again, that came in about 6 years into the show. After about 6 years, we added the music element, and that's during dinner, and it's it's lively, and it's kind of getting everybody ready for the show. The music that we do is like roots country or Americana or folk, and we're blues, of course. We're using the music from the region very specifically, yes, because that's what we know. That's the music that's played here, and we do 2 special shows a year. We do a Delta music show every year, and we do an Ozark music show every year, and we have musicians come on and tell stories and then play a song. Like they might tell a story about the song that they wrote, and they do a song, and so we incorporate that even to a deeper level twice a year.
You recently took Tales on the road to Eureka Springs. Is that the first time that you've taken the show on the road?
No, it's actually the 3rd time we take it on the road, but the furthest we've been so far. So we've been twice to Benton and did 2 Tales on the Roads in Benton. We just recently were accepted with the Arkansas Arts Council Arts on Tour roster. And so a nonprofit organization can get a grant from the Arts Council to bring us off-site. So we're actually going to Fayetteville in August, and then we're going to Springdale. We're going to Fairfield Bay, and we're trying to right now work out some details about going down to Helena as well. So yeah, we'll be. I can't do it a lot because obviously I own the restaurant and I have 3 small children, and I can't just hit the road all the time, which would be cool. But probably 4 or 5 times a year is kind of what I'm projecting right now to go, because not everybody can come here. Not everybody can, because they may not send us a story because they're like, well, I can't come to Little Rock. I'm not able to do that. Also, we love to go like to Eureka and use the local talent there, use the local musicians, and be able to showcase their area along with their storytellers. So it's a fun project. And as you saw, that show sold out just like we sell out here. So, they were excited, and everybody, I think, had a great time. And
where do you want to take Tales from the South from here?
I think the question probably is more, where is Tales going to take me from here? I've learned a long time ago just to let go and to see where things go. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. We've got a lot of good press here in the last 6-8 months, and we'll kind of see where it goes. People have asked me or have said, you could double your audience every week. You could go to a bigger venue. You could do this, and that's probably true. We probably could. However, I like it here, and the reason why, here at Starving Arts Cafe, and the reason why is because it's so small and it's so intimate, and we've done shows where it's a big theater setting, and it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like someone's telling you a story. It feels like they're on stage performing, and those are 2 different things for us, A big part of the show is dinner, Because as Southerners, we sit around the table at dinner and tell stories, either while we're eating or after we've eaten or whatever it is. It's a big part of my growing up. And so that's the feel of what we've got going on here. And so when we do it like at Eureka, we go to other small restaurants, and we do it at places like that so we can hopefully recreate that feeling. And so what I wouldn't be interested in is growing it to a huge space where even though we might be doubling our ticket sales, it's not the same, it's not the same effect.